Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC's Legends of Tomorrow. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously the Legends are in position. It's like, right, we got to take this opportunity to go on the Wave Rider. Who's ever waiting for us? It doesn't matter. And it's so sad because at the same time this is all happening, like, all the other time travelers were feeling themselves. It's like, yeah, we need to go do this. Like, let's go help them. Like, whoever's trying to stop. Like, obviously, Sarah saved Duke Ferdinand. She she changed the fixed point in time, and they're all rallying behind her. Sadly, they're going up against the Robo Legends. And I love just even Zari saying the line of, wow, we really are our own worst enemies. And in both the metaphorical sense and literal sense, that's always been true to some extent. And now it's even more true now. So I love that, but sadly, Robo Legends ripped through the other. First alien dude got punched through the gut. His buddies got shurikens to the head. Then, like, the guy who actually was the owner of the fixed point got. The other time travelers, either they're not dead, either they're dead or they left. I'm like, once again, that's heartbreaking. It's like, oh, we had this triumphant moment. Yeah, everybody. And just everyone's dead this episode. That's kind of sad. All the characters you kind of spent some time with last episode, they're gone now. Still doesn't answer the question, are there other, like, stores like this across the, like, the timeline, like, at other fixed points in history? Because it's sad because they've been there for a while. To be fair, they were all waiting their turn to basically try and fix this point in time and die anyway, so dealing with the robot versions of themselves turned out to be quite the complicated situation. Sarah eventually tried to talk to them because it's like, right, because in the end, Thawne ended up getting killed, which is heartbreaking to some extent. It's like, oh, this is a version of Thawne who turned things around, and now he's dead. Once again, I guess you could make the argument it is time kind of fixing itself now because, did he make up for all that he had done at the point in time? I don't know if there's any necessarily making up for what he's done. Because even then, once again, this is Season 2 Thawne, who was part of the Legion of Doom. This is still the same Thawne that's already killed Barry's mom, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe at this point, I can't remember if he had already gone back in time and killed Barry's mom. You're still the same person responsible for that, even if you are a paradox version of that person. But then that leads to a whole conversation of, well, timeline-wise speaking, who's you? If there's a paradox version of you created, that's kind of like an outlier to the timeline. Does that even count as you anymore? Technically not, because this Eobard went off and did, some good. Granted, he was put in this position, but he accepted it and he changed his mindset on things. So, and I think it is ironic that it would be Robo Sarah is the one that ended up killing him, but he does pass the responsibility of like, yeah, it is on you. You made a promise to me, like, if anything happens to me, that you will take over as the one looking after this fixed point, because it has to be protected, because obviously the drastic changes, if anything happens here and things change here, then who knows how drastically this will affect the future, the world, so. But yeah, Sarah tried talking to them. It's like, right, you didn't have to kill Thawne. Even I'm saying that, like, he was literally protecting the timeline, but it's like, right, Gideon didn't, like, for one, she sent hammers to handle something that deserves a scalpel, but to be fair, she's not real. You would think she would have thought that far ahead, but I guess it's like, right, kill all the time travelers. She didn't know about Thawne's position and things. I don't know if that really would have changed anything, because she's a stickler from like, no, we don't need any time travelers screwing things up, even if he is someone maintaining this very point in him, So that might just be, well, to be fair, our muscle-bound idiot, Robo Nate, is in charge, so maybe she just left it to his discretion, which was kind of like the worst idea, because you would think you'd upgrade him to be smarter than what he was, but him being a muscle-bound idiot worked out in your favor. I love the whole thing of like, yeah, like, I guess, like, whenever Sarah hit him, it changed his voice by turning him into Arnold, which I love. But I really like how they handled things where they basically made, because obviously Sarah is kind of the leader, and obviously Gwen is talking about how she's the hope. Like, it's like, right, you helped basically me, who was like broken and lonely. Like, you built me back up, and you're like, that's kind of what the legends do. They find misfits across history, different circumstances, brought them together and built them up into the best versions of themselves, in some shape or form. And I like that. It's like Gwen's like, yeah, you kind of basically did that for me, and I got to be grateful for you guys. And so he, with the actual wartime experience, is the one kind of leading the charge. And so it's like, right, he comes up with the Grandmaster plan and very obviously. It feels like it's in Legends fashion, but also better than Legend fashion, just because it's like, it all worked out. There was some hiccups along the way, but it wasn't like let's face it, an asinine Legends plan. So it was just like, no, like a legitimately military strategist, like, move, sending Behrad in to play like his Robo counterpart who's dead. So I'm like, I love that. And when he encounters Robo Spooner and Robo Gary, I love the whole thing of him being like, yeah, I lost count. And she's just like, oh my god, like, I can't imagine if she was like, imagine one of the legends stuck aboard, we can, like, suck up all the oxygen out of here and watch them die. And she's just like, like, so evil and laughing. I'm like, ew, that's so mean, seeing, like, it's so weird seeing, like, Spooner is such a psychopath. And even Bear, I was like, like, that's so psychotic, so. But obviously, Behrad can't get towards Gideon because the only one that's allowed to get towards Gideon is Zari. Now, this is one of those things where you're like, if you overthink things too much, it's like, the show probably realizes that, but they're like, it's the Legends. You have to have a bumbling way to handle this. Because I'm like, at no point in time did you ever decide, let's switch to the other Zari. Like, they've never set up any limitations on how often they can switch and stuff like that. So, because the last time the other Zari was out was during the reality TV show, like, when they were, like, in hell and dealing with, like, the reality TV thing. Like, that's the last time she popped out. But I don't know if they've ever set it up, like, there's a limitation to how often they can switch back and forth. Because I was about to say, like, who has the totem? I guess because, like, we know, like, right, you can tell the difference between them because the Robos can't actually use their powers. And that's a little harder with some of the cases, but, like, Nate can actually still up, but he's a pretty obvious comparison. Because I even love, like, he's like, wow, like, really? Like, they made his, like, arms, like, jacked like that? And even Zari's like, yeah, it seems like he's overcompensating for something. But I love Gear being like, oh, but he fills out those pants so well. Or it fills something out. I think he was referring to the pants, but my point is, like, Zari 1.0 is the actual hacker of the group, so it would make sense getting her. But I love that, just the shenanigans of it, of, like, right, convincing Robo, Ava, and Robo, Astra, and, like, basically made them, drink something that was basically that was going to mess up both of their stomachs, because Gary made quite the concoction, and Astra had a situation coming up topside, while Ava had a situation below deck, essentially. And then Gary I thought the easiest thing would have just been to eat them, but Gary just pushed them into hell. So I'm like, okay, that obviously comes back to bite them later on, but still. So that was one way of dealing with that. And then I love, like, Robo Zari finding her way on board. And to me, I thought that was so fascinating when it came down to, like, the whole, like, oh, it's Robo Zari versus real Zari. And just them slapping each other. I'm like, what is this? And I love that the little fight they have. It's just like, and they're kicking, and none of their kicks are, because they're not even close to each other when they're kicking. I'm like, I love how stupid this looks. It's so good how crazy this is. I'm like, yes, this is how you handle things Legends fashion. Because I'm like, once again, wouldn't it just be easier just to, like, I'm the real Zari, switch over to Zari, from the Zari 1.0. See, oh, what's going on here? It's like, oh, that's the fake Zari. Once again, it's like, it's too simple, it's too easy. It's like, I know the writers have thought about it, but they're like, who cares? It's Legends, we can do whatever we want to. We could be like, oh yeah, no one thought about that. We could just make it say, like, the Legends, none of them thought about it in a moment. And it's like, alright, well, you have to eat one of them. And it's like, Gary's like, well, which one? She's like, I don't know, eat both of them and just, can you spit out the real one? He's like, I don't know. And then Astra the real Zari ends up unplugging the other one, and Gary's like, hey, and she's like, were you planning on eating Gary? He's like, no. I love it. There are ways around that. They could have, like, found a way, like, either have her use her totem powers or, like, turn into the other Zari, but whatever. it got resolved either way, and this is the most Legends way to have resolved that situation. So even her hacking Gideon, like, wouldn't you need the others are? Okay, never mind. Because she said, rather than putting it in the codes, she's like, oh, where's the Delta? And she's like, you know what? And just unplugs Gideon. I was like, okay, that's one way to handle this as well, so. But I do love that Behrad and Astra finally had their moment. It's just like, oh, he's like, you talk about perfect timing, and they kissed, and she's like, finally, and he's like, yeah! I was almost halfway expecting Zari to walk in on her and be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It just kind of felt awkward about it, but yeah. I love how Team Ruckus tried to cause a ruckus, but it's like teaching people, he's like, Nate's like, I didn't know how hard it'd be to teach people a high five or whatever, but then they found other means of doing it. One of those singing fishes, Darth Vader is Luke's father. It's like, who's Darth Vader? Must be an American thing. And then like they hook one person up with a VR set and everything, drawing out the fake Legends. Quite the ruckus. And I love Spooner was like, hey, Gary, it's me. I'm Robo Spooner pretending to be human Spooner. But we gotta be careful. Those legend idiots are pretending to be us. So he proceeds to eat Robo Spooner, who has a grenade and explodes inside of him. I'm like, okay, that worked out. I just love how completely and utterly ridiculous this episode was. I mean, it's like, do I expect anything different? But I also do love there is this sweet moment where immediately, the moment Astra's like yelling at Gideon, like, you're staying in the manor. It's like the moment that happened, I'm like, oh, she's worried about you. She's scared. Because when like Robo Behrad came in and he was almost going to shoot her, like, she panicked. And even Gary's like, oh, that's so sweet. And she's like, shut up, Gary. Because she's like, yeah, I felt sad. And she was like, I felt angry and fear. All these emotions. It's like, it's very, I mean, for one, she is kind of Gideon's mom. But also, it's super sweet because it's like, yeah, there's almost like there's almost this feeling of the void. Because Astra had her situation with her mom. Like, she was a little girl when her mom, like, died. So for her to be able to play that role, like, it almost, I think it almost feels like she, like, was able to kind of work through a lot of the stuff with her mom, about her mom, and now it's almost like, oh, she's kind of entered being a mother herself, you know? Which is really sweet, because even later on, she's like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, like, left you out of all the planning and stuff like Gideon, because at the end, all they needed was Gideon to, it's one of those things of, like, the meta of the joke, not joke, but plan was so interesting, because at the end of the day, what did they do? They used Gideon, who's now a real body, to use her voice to convince them to just, but it's like, yeah, it's weird just, like, seeing the actress Amy just, like, using voiceover in that moment. It felt weird, because I'm like, oh, it just, I don't know, there's like a meta level to that. Just because it's like, oh, she's always been a disembodied voice. Now she has a body, but she's pretending to be the disembodied voice again. In particular, their disembodied voice. So it's just interesting. And convinced fake Robo Sarah and Robo Nate to rip out their CPUs and stuff like that. Because it was about to turn into a full-blown brawl. I would have loved to see how that would have played out, but still. Which is sad, too, because, like, Robo Sarah was good until she upgraded. It's like, yeah, because I think that's also why, like, Robo Zari was the way she was. Because amongst all of them, Robo Zari had gotten upgraded once. The others, like, she still made... Because amongst all of the legends, she kind of maintained a little bit more of herself than the others. I mean, because obviously everyone else was more extreme versions of themselves. And then she kind of did, but she kind of fought back her programming a little bit. And since she decided to join Evil Gideon and not work with Robo Sarah, that ended up with things being the way they are. So she was just like, amongst the legends, she was kind of like, still kind of true to herself, which is kind of sad considering, like, Sarah, like, which is so sad because they'll never know that side of things. We as the audience will know that Robo Sarah was good at one point in time, but then she got, like, upgraded and turned into who she is, who she became, and it's kind of sad at the end of the day. I even love Sarah when she found out Robo Nate was captain. She's like, that was a choice. Which I think, obviously, it's nothing against Nate himself. It's more so about the fact is that this version of Nate was chosen, like this muscle-bound idiot version of him was chosen as captain, so. But luckily, at the end of the day, everything worked out. They got the Wave Rider back. They took Evil Gideon out of commission. They took out all of the Robo Legends. But Sarah's like, no, like, I'm going to have to replace Thawne. And I was almost wondering, I was like, oh, it's like, at first I was like, oh, Gwen's probably going to volunteer or something. Because, like, I was like, I don't think they're going to do that. That could be an interesting send-off. But it's also like, you don't have your goodbye with Ava. I'm like, there's no way they're just going to do that. But it's like, oh, Nate found another way around it. Because he was like, no. Like, because Nate, Spooner, nor Gwen, neither one of them were going to leave her behind. It's like, we're in this together. We're going to go home together. And so Nate was like, yo, we beat you two losers. And now I get the honor of having this to be here at this fixed point. And Robo Nate, who's like, oh, like, now because of getting knocked out and then plugged back in is now back to its Arnold voice. It's like, no, I get to do it. And he snatches it from him. He's like, I win. And at the last second realize how much of an idiot he is and gets sucked away. It's like, yeah, you need an idiot to kind of handle things like this. So, poor bastard, but yeah, he's gonna be stuck there. I'm curious to people who gave. Well, I guess it's like as long as someone's doing a job, they don't care. So I'm curious if there's gonna be any like, is that gonna cause any issues in the future? The fact is that happened. We'll have to ultimately wait and see, but there is that. That ending, like, I was just scared for a second. I was like, it's going to happen. The camera angle focused on Gideon the way it did, especially because she had that beautiful moment with Astra. And even, Astra being like, oh, I'm so proud of you. I shouldn't have, like, sidelined you and stuff like that. It's just, I'm very proud of you. And she's like, thanks, Mom. And you're like, oh. And then especially Astra kind of smiling and hugging. And it's like, yeah, everything's coming up Astra. She's got her daughter. She's got a boyfriend. It's all great, And then Gideon gets stabbed at the end, and none other than, just to stick the irony in even more, that it's Robo Astra crawling out of the bowels of hell, which is ironic in its own right, because it's, I didn't even think about that at the time. It's like, yeah, Astra, who managed to get away from hell, crawling out of this robot version of her, crawling out of hell, having enough power, just one last middle finger, stabbing Gideon, potentially killing her, and they're both kind of dying beside each other. I'm like, so what do they do? Do the legends try to go back in time? Because Astra probably will try and use her magic to resurrect. Now that's where John started going on the deep, darker end of because it's like, right, because Gideon isn't just a robot anymore. She's a human being now. So it's like, what do? Do you put her does she go back to being a consciousness, like the AI? Do you try and pull her out of her body, try to get her back to the Wave Rider? All the systems should be fine, but I'm curious, without a Gideon on board, will they have access to everything on the Wave Rider? Will they find her too late and stuff like that? Obviously, it's going to be heartbreaking for Gary, because, that's his girlfriend, too. Oh, no, it's just, it doesn't matter. They're a huge family, so it's going to suck all around. But, dude, it's going to be heartbreaking for both Gary and Astra. But like I said, do they make her an AI again? How does she come, Look, I get the feeling Astra's going to try and tap into some dark magic to try and resurrect her. And once again, we've seen how that can go with John's story. So, but she doesn't care. It's I'm going to bring my daughter back. It's well, they can't. Do they time travel? But then they be time traveling in their own timeline, and that could cause issues in its own right. So, and especially if she dies like that, I don't know if it's going to be a thing of time technically, because they probably don't want to stick around this time too much, especially considering Robo. Nate is still going to be potentially an issue. Granted, he is rewinding to an earlier point in time, so they shouldn't run into him because they're already past that point timeline-wise. So he should, because every time he's going to restart, to stop any attempts to change that fixed point. So they shouldn't run into him. So there shouldn't be any issue there. But still, it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see how they handle all of this going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Either way, I think Gideon's going to be all right. I'm just curious, how we're going to get there storyline wise. Either we're going to take the dark, magic route, and it's going to get bumpy, and just what's it's going to do to Astra, especially having such a heartwarming moment and just to lose her, especially after she did so much to make sure that Gideon wouldn't get hurt, and that also for it to be the robot version of you that did it, that's going to probably sting even more. So like I said, we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but really that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.